Welcome everyone. In today's lesson video, I have on the board logarithm with tables. So the topic is logarithm of numbers, but in this case, using tables. Some people call it log using tables. On the left, I have numbers greater than 1. On the right, I have numbers less than 1. I have about 7 questions which I will use to illustrate how to find logarithm of numbers greater than 1, that is from 1 upwards, numbers greater or equals to 1, and numbers less than 1. For you to do well in this topic, you need to get the tables required. Say logarithm with tables. And when we talk about tables, we are referring to what we call the statistical table. Some people call it 4-figure table. I have this one here. This is mathematical or statistical table. This is one of the things we refer to as table. I also have a calculator. Calculator could be referred to as tables as well. So anytime you see a question that says log using tables, know that if you get this is the best. If you can get a statistical table, there is another bigger one, the one that is bigger than this. Any of them is okay. And then if you can lay your hand on a calculator, a scientific calculator, that will also do the same job. Now, I want you to pay attention while I explain how we find logarithm of numbers that are greater or equals to 1 and numbers that are less than 1. Before I go on, I want to tell you something very important. The logarithm of any number is made up of 2 parts. The logarithm of any number is made up of 2 parts. The integer part and the fractional part. These integer parts I'll be referring to as characteristic, while this fractional part I'll be referring to as mantissa. So at this point, I will say that there are 2 parts of any log of any number, the characteristic and the mantissa. Now, for each of these numbers on the board, when we find the log must have the characteristic and the mantissa. Now, it will be very important you understand how to find the characteristic of any number. For numbers greater than 1, to find the characteristic, what you do is you check the integer part of that number. How many digits are in the integer part of the number? For example, the first one, log 2. 2 is an integer and is only a digit. So the digit here is 1 for the integer part, is just 1. So the characteristic will be that number of digits minus 1. The characteristic is always 1 less than the number of digits in that number. So because this number has only 1 digit in its integer part, because it's just a whole number 2, the characteristic will be that number of digits, which is 1, minus 1. So the characteristic is 0. you put point. So the characteristic of this number is 0. Then for the mantissa part, you use the four-figure table or the statistical table to get the value. Now, before I go to the statistical table, I want to run it down, this characteristic, because it's very important. Getting the characteristic part of each and every one of them is very important. For the second one, log 20. 20 is a whole number and there are two digits there. Because there are two digits there, the characteristic will be these two digits minus 1. So 2 minus 1, the characteristic will be 1. So 1 point. That's the characteristic of 220. For 251, it will be 3 minus 1, which will give you 2 points. There are three digits in the number. So the characteristic will be 3 minus 1. You always subtract 1. As long as the number is greater than 1, subtract 1 from the number of digits of the integer part. This one will have 4. There are 4 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the integer part. Then it will be 4 minus 1. That will give you 3. Now, what if you have a number like this, maybe 25.01? You are asked to find the log of this one. For example, this one is 2501. Everything is whole number here, but here 25.01. Now, what will be the characteristic of this one? Look at the whole number part, the integer part. How many digits are there? It's 2. Only 2 digits that are there. So the characteristic will be 2 minus 1, and that will give you 1. So the characteristic of 25.01 is 1. While the characteristic of 2501 is 3. Please take note. We are looking at only the whole number part of that number. Once you look at the whole number part or the integer part, how many digits are there? Remove 1 from that number and you will get your characteristic. Now let's go over to numbers less than 1. For numbers less than 1, to get the characteristic, what you need to do is check how many zeros that are in that number. The number of zeros in the number takes care of what the characteristic will be. That is, how many zeros are in this number? Just 1 0. So the characteristic will be 1. But in this case, because the numbers are less than 1, it will be by 1. This by 1 is the same thing as minus 1. In log using table, we prefer to write it in this form. This by 1, which is minus 1, we'll write it as by 1. Now, this one, how many zeros are there? 2. Because there are 2 zeros there, the characteristic is by 2. How many zeros are in this one? 3. 1, 2, 3. So the characteristic will be by 3. So look at the 2 very well. For numbers that are from 1 greater or equals to 1, check the number of digits of the whole number part. Remove 1 from it for you to get to your characteristic. But for the numbers less than 1, you check how many zeros there. The number of zeros takes care of what the characteristic will be. Now, for the second part of the number in logarithm, I told you every log of any number has 2 parts. Every log has 2 parts, the characteristic and the mantissa. So we have seen how to find the characteristic. Now let's talk about the mantissa. For the mantissa, it's the same for all. What do I mean by that? Check, only take the significant figures and look it up in the 4-figure table or the mathematical table. So for this one, if you check the mathematical table, you discover that the lowest number there is 10. and the highest number is 99. So 2 is not there. If you open the mathematical table right now, you discover that 2 is not there. It starts from 10 and then 99 is the last number there. So what do we do when we are given asked to find log of 2? Now, log of 2 simply means 2 put 0, it becomes 20. So look for log 20. Look for 20 on the table there. That's all. If you look at the table there, this one I have here as an example, you see that there is a column called X, and then you also notice that we have numbers 0, 1, 2 till 9 columns. We have columns there, and then the next one we have is difference table. Say differences, a difference table. So what you do is under column X, you look for 20 because there is no 2 there. You look for 20 under 0. There is no other digit there, but you look for 20 under 0. 20 under 0. And if you do that, you will get 3010. That is what you will find there. Now, the next one says log 20. The same thing, go to the table, of course, 20 is there. So you look for 20 under 0. Because there is no other digit, you check it under 0. And it will give you still 3010. Then, the next one, log 251. You look for 25 under 1. 25 under 1. And if you check 25 under 1, supposed to give you 3997. That's what it will give you. Then the next one, log, what you look out for is 25 under 0 difference 1. And this difference, you add it. You add difference. Whatever you get from the difference table, add it to the number you got from any of the columns. So if you do that, it will be 3981. Now, if you check, if you look up for this one, it will still give you the same thing. Because this will be 25 under 0 difference 1. And it will still, you will still land at the same thing. Now, the next one is this 0.25. We have found the characteristic. So if you go to the 4-figure table, you look out for 25. Only the significant numbers, the significant number part of the question, that's what we consider. All these zeros will not be considered again when you are looking for the mantissa part. So you look for 25 under 0. And if you do that, it will give you 3979. That's what it will give you from the table. And then the next one, of course, it will still give you the same thing because what you look out for is only 25 under 0. 3979. The last one, what you look out for is 37 under 2. And 37 under 2 will give you 5705. That's what it will give you. So, in summary, you can see that every log has 2 parts. the characteristic part and the mantissa part. To get the characteristic, if the number is from 1 up, check the number of digits of the whole number. Subtract 1 from it. That will form your characteristic. Then use the statistical table to find the mantissa. For numbers less than 1, the number of zeros in the number will form the characteristic. Of course, it will be in the negative, bar 1, bar 2, depending on how many zeros that are there. For the mantissa part, you also use the statistical table to find the significant figures part of the number. That's what you look out for on the 4-figure table. Next, we are going to see how to find antilog. We have seen how we can use the logarithm table. Next, we are going to look at how we can use the anti-logarithm table. In continuation, I have on the board anti-logarithm of numbers. I divided it into two. Numbers with positive characteristics and numbers with negative characteristics. Anytime you are asked to find the antilog of any number, there are two things you're supposed to do. One, check the mantissa part. The mantissa part, look up this mantissa part on the 4-figure table to know the value you are going to write down. Now, for the number I have on the board, if you go to the anti-logarithm table, because we have a separate table on the statistical table called anti-logarithm of numbers. So once you locate that table for anti-logarithm of numbers, you will discover that on the column X, that the numbers there starts with point, 10, 25, and so on and so forth. So what does that mean? It tells you that what you use to read the antilog table is the mantissa part. So the mantissa part will provide value from the antilog table for us. Then the characteristic part will tell us the position of the decimal point in that number. So two things are involved. One, use the mantissa part of the number you are trying to find its antilog to provide the value from the table, and then use the characteristic part to know the position of the decimal point. Using this number on the board as an example, 2.7481. The antilog of 2.7481 from the table, we are going to look up for 0.74. That's what we'll check under column X. We'll look for 0.74. Trace it under column 8, difference 1. And if you do that, it will give you 5598. Difference 1 is 1. You add it, it will give you 5599. Now, when you have this, we have gotten the value from the antilog table. The next thing is to use the characteristic to know the position of the decimal point. Because the characteristic is positive, you have to reverse what we did for numbers greater than 1 when we are looking for log of numbers greater than 1. Remember, what we did there was the number of digits of the integer part minus 1. That gave us the characteristic there. So here, because the characteristic is positive, we will reverse that move. That is, instead of, we subtracted 1 then, here we will now add 1. That one we subtracted when we were finding the log. We add it back here. So the characteristic is 2. It will now be 2 plus 1. That will give you 3. So this 3 simply means that you have to move 3 places and put the decimal point. Starting from the first digit, you count 1, 2, 3. You put your point. So this is the final answer. That is the antilog of this number, 559.9. For this one, the characteristic is negative, but 2. And you are asked to find the antilog. Still do the same thing. You start the same way we started here. Use the mantissa to get the value from the antilog table. And if you do that, because the numbers, the mantissa, they are the same, it will still give you 5599. But for the position of the decimal point, that's where the difference lies. This is bar 2. If you go back to what we did when we were finding the mantis, the characteristic for numbers less than 1, you discover that the number of zeros decide what the characteristic will be. So because the characteristic here is 2, is bar 2. Bar 2 simply means 2 zeros. So put 2 zeros in this number, 0.0. So this becomes your final answer. If you look at this one, like I said, positive characteristics. Please take note, numbers like this is also inclusive. Any number that is 0 point is also part of the positive characteristic. The same thing. So for a number that is 0.7481, after checking the characteristic on the mantissa on the 4-figure table, which will give you this, then the characteristic is 0. As long as it's positive, you have to add 1 to it. So adding 1 to this 0 will give you 1. And that 1 means 1 decimal place. So you count and put 1, put point. So this is the antilog. This is the antilog of this number. Why this one is the antilog of this one. So take note, if the number has a positive characteristic, after getting the value from the antilog table, using the mantissa to get the value from the antilog table, add 1 to the characteristic to know the true position of the decimal point. But for negative characteristics, you don't add anything. The number, that's negative characteristic, if it is 2, just know that there will be 2 zeros in the final answer. If it's 3, bar 3, it will be 3 zeros. If it's bar 1, it will have just 1 zero. That is how we find antilog of numbers. Next, we are going to see how we can do calculations. The calculations that we do involving numbers using logarithm table. That's the next aspect of this topic we will look at.